Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Brice, and I am joined here with a new friend that doesn't feel new, Angie, who is also from the South. She's just like a couple hours down the road from me in Athens, Georgia. And I'm going to say, Angie, you won for the Athens, for the town tarot that we were going to do with Stephanie. But I started watching your channel. I've been talking to you off screen. I was like, I have to get this girl on because we need more Southern women voices in this movement that we're in. And Angie, like, we were talking off screen, and I was like, I got to hit the record button because these stories are just too great. But before we go any further, though, I want to go ahead and show you guys Angie's channel so that when we're done, you guys can go and hit subscribe, because Southern women, I've said it before, we're the most savage human beings in the whole world. But we do it with a smile on our face and our lipstick on. So if you guys want a great channel to watch with Angie, go and subscribe to her channel. We'll get more into what you're putting on your channel in a little bit, but welcome to the show, Angie.
Thank you so much. I've been so excited. I've been very nervous. You know, it's funny how we think that we're not worthy. You know, a lot of us will think, oh, I can't believe Brice, has invited me to do this because why is she even interested in me or finds anything that I have to say interesting? And then I'm thinking, I was telling you earlier, talking to my best friend yesterday, and she was like, stop it.
Yeah. And that's that. And I know what you're saying. That's that, we're so conditioned in the matrix to think there's this group of people and that group of people, but I'm just a normal person, and I wouldn't even have a platform if it wasn't for David Zublik. And so I kind of learned that right away with the YouTube game, that in our corner of the internet, I think it's important that we showcase each other, especially since I do have a bigger platform. I can showcase other people's work, because it is hard to catch those algorithms. It is hard to get your story out sometimes unless you can catch it with another channel that can help you. And that's my whole thing. We're all just walking each other home. We're all here to help each other. And your voice is important. Everybody's voice is important. Your voice is very important. I was watching one of your videos the other day about religion and spirituality, where you talked about how and we were laughing. I was laughing about that with Angie because, down here in the South, the church is such a staple part of our culture. And it's not even, for a lot of cases, it's not even about the religion. It's a social center as well. And I've told this story before, but before we get into it, I told Angie I'd tell this story on the show. So my mom's family, the Brices, my name is my mom's maiden name. They moved to Georgia from Charleston, South Carolina. The Brices are all from, my grandfather was a surgeon, and they got moved to Atlanta. And back in the day, they may still do this in small towns, I don't know, whenever you moved, the church ladies from different churches would come to your house, bring you casseroles, introduce you to the neighborhood, invite you to the church. Well, my grandmother at the time had just moved to Atlanta. She had 4 children, 4 girls. The youngest was a baby. And my mom said they were playing in their house, and all of a sudden my grandmother yells, "Girls, go hide under the bed. The church ladies are coming." So they all got under the bed with my grandmother to hide from the church ladies knocking on the front door. And so my mom said for years, she was terrified of the church ladies. She didn't know who the church ladies were. She just knew she had to hide from them. And I just find that hysterical because that's so Southern culture. And so let's start there, Angie. Let's talk about that video, because you were talking about an astrology book you've gotten and what your relationship is like now with the divine since you've come into this great awakening, especially kind of moving out of that cultural conditioning into more of a more authentic place of understanding God or the cosmos or...
Right. Well, it all just really makes sense. It's not anything that I'm trying to even figure out anymore. I mean, I don't know everything, but everything that I do learn, that I do discover, immediately clicks. It's not like, oh, I don't know what these words in this King James version mean, and I just don't understand the Bible. I'm supposed to understand it, but I don't. It's not like that. It's just like everything just makes
resonates.
Yes, it does.
It resonates.
Going back to the whole thing about the church ladies, that just brought back a memory of, I grew up in Albany, Georgia, and I had country grandparents and then a city grandpa. So I had both. And my country grandparents, I stayed with most weekends, and they lived out in Sylvester, out in the country. They had a farm, they had cows, they had people came and paid to pick beans and by the bushel, and they also had fish ponds where people paid to fish, and, that kind of thing. So I grew up like weighing fish, shelling peas, and all this. But I can remember so many times my grandmother, Gertrude, Grandma Gert, she'd say, Angie, they're coming down the driveway. She had this long driveway. It was straight, and you could see like when the church people were coming, whether it be even her friends that just went to church with her that were coming over to play cards, which she also had to put the cards away. She couldn't have they played setback and pinochle and canasta, and she had to hide the cards if the church people were coming, except for certain church people that were her friends that played cards with her. So, like, I think I was always there. So I just remember all these things. But I remember one day she's saying, run back to the closet and put on your culottes. She had made me these ugly polyester elastic waist, long, you know what culottes are?
Yeah.
That's what she called them.
Yeah.
Like, they were baggy. Like,
well, and that when you said that reminded me of because even in I think my childhood, so I'm 39, I think I was like the last generation to experience like a true Southern like childhood. We had to wear saddle Oxford shoes with lacy socks.
Yeah.
We had
which I love now. Like,
I see my nieces and my nephew now, and they're in like play clothes all the time. Like we had to wear like our hair was always like pulled back in a bow. It was always very prim and proper. Like the sun, and so I could when you said that your grandmother would yell like that, I could hear my parents yelling like, "Go!" I'll tell you. Okay, so you know the Piggly Wiggly, right? The Piggly Wiggly.
Yeah, we ate it. We didn't eat there, but yeah, shop there all the time.
So I was, this was when I was in college, and I had come home to visit for, I can't remember if it was summer, some holiday. And I was a runner at that time, and I'd gone out to run a trail early in the morning because we know in Georgia when it's that hot, you got to go early in the morning. So on my way back home, I stopped by the Piggly Wiggly to grab a bottle of water. And I walked into my mom's house in my sweaty running clothes with a bag from the Piggly Wiggly with water in it. And my mother freaked out. She was like, I hope no one saw you. Did you really go into the Piggly Wiggly with those sweaty clothes on? I hope no one saw you. I was like, well, first of all, it's like 7:00 in the morning. I'm like, Mom, it's just the Piggly Wiggly. But that's that Southern, like, got to have your mascara and your lipstick. I'll tell you another. I don't know. My mom will probably kill me for saying this, but one time, she was having a very serious conversation with me, and she sat me down and she said, with my sister, girls, if I'm ever in a coma, and I thought she was going to say, know how much I love you, or this is where, the money's buried. I don't know. She goes, just make sure you got my roots and my face done.
Well, you saw I just did my roots for you.
Yes. That's it. Just make sure you get my roots done and my face done. I was like, okay, Mom. So that's still magnolias, and I tell people all the time that's one of the most beautiful things about growing up in the South too is I like watch still magnolias. That's like how you grow up. That's that. And I say all the time, Southern women, I think Southern women do rule the roof in most houses. They are the kind of the head of the house, even though in a lot of homes it's the man that's making the money. The wife kind of runs everything.
I think my husband used to say, and we've been married 25 years now. So I remember in the beginning, he would say things like, I rule the roost, but you rule the rooster. Like, you know where he's going.
My friend Catherine Edwards sent me a meme once of this Southern girl looking out. And it was like when Southern women ask you if do you know Jesus, I can't remember what it said. They're not asking for politeness. They're asking you because you're about to go meet him. You know, like that. You don't that Southern mother can give you that look.
Well, right at the end, right before he died, he accepted. Yeah.
Yes.
Always the stories.
It is like, and my grandparents too. My mom's mom was from Charleston, South Carolina, so she had that like South Carolina accent. I just remember her saying sugar. I never saw her in pants. She always wore dresses and high heels.
I can remember when we started kind of wearing pants. I have an aunt growing up that her husband was a deacon in the church, the Baptist church, and she. Oh, I remember when they got divorced and she started wearing pants. It was just
so scandalous. So scandalous. My mom's mom, my dad's mom wore pants, but my mom's mom, she always had a beautiful dress on. She always had her jewelry on. She always had her high heels on, and she was a housewife. Yeah. But she would have women come over and play bridge. They would play bridge together. And you're right. That's what's so funny to me. Like, I laugh about the tarot cards. I'm like, how many Southern women have a deck of tarot cards hidden in their house from their husbands?
Probably.
Like, how many?
My daughter, and I have a daughter in Brooklyn, New York. Can you believe? I mean, yeah. And so she just told me the other day that a friend of hers gave her a deck, and she's trying to learn. So I don't have one. I really don't. But
I find them fascinating and fun. My dad's mom, I've told this story before. She was kind of she was from Quitman, Georgia. You might know where Quitman, Georgia is.
I know where Quitman is.
Yep. Yeah, that's where she's from.
Thomasville. Yeah.
Yes, right by Valdosta is the big city. But she grew up on
I used to do a festival there called the Skillet Festival.
Oh, really? I haven't been to Quitman in such a long time. My great-grandfather died when I was 4, so it was the last time I went to Quitman. But I do remember the house, and I do remember the property, because there's this huge property, this old, like, plantation house. In fact, I know this is probably going to be, people watching us are awake, but my grandmother had a painting of her house she grew up in. That's very big in the South, too, to have paintings of your house. And she would tell everybody the house was
behind me.
Yes, that's so normal, right? That's so normal. My grandmother would tell people, they'd come in, she'd be like, now this house is so old, it was built by slave labor. Like, that would be the first thing she told people about the house that she grew up in, the painting of the house. But yeah, my grandmother from Quitman, Georgia, she was very much into the metaphysical, and she went to church every Sunday. She even played the organ at church at one point, but she had her books on reincarnation that she hid under the bed from my grandfather. She loved meditation. She always wanted to know what I was learning in India. So there is, and I think too, and Angie, we were talking about before you bought a book on the ghost of Athens, but I've said this before, in the deep South here, this land breathes.
Yes, it does. I want to know what's happening here on the land I built this house on, because this is a newer home we built, but there's just things happening here. Like, what does this land hold? Like, what history does it really hold?
Yes, it's my good friend Cindy, who is family's from Peru. We were talking about it off in Atlanta. She's my friend offline, and she was saying too that the South is the most magical place in the world. There's just something mystical about the land down here. And she goes down to the Okefenokee Swamp a lot to do stuff. And we know down in New Orleans, the Bayou, like, there's just this element of nature. And I don't know, have you heard of, since you're from that area of Georgia, have you heard of the Georgia werewolf?
No.
I've covered it on my channel before, but actually it hit me, maybe we should do another deep dive into the Georgia werewolf, because it's near that area of the legend of the Georgia werewolf, of the shapeshifter. So, and since you're from that area, that might be
I think if I had seen that video maybe a year ago, I wouldn't have believed it. And then now I'm like, oh.
Yes. I covered that story a long time ago on my channel, and I actually something told me, like, Angie and I need to go back and relook at that story, because you're from that vicinity, so you know more about that land and about what's going on in that area and Georgia. For those who aren't from Georgia, Georgia's an interesting state, because North Georgia, technically kind of where Angie and I are, it's at the base of Appalachia, and so it's very green. It's a lot of hills and low mountains, but then you get south and you're getting close to Florida, so it becomes like plains. It becomes very low land. And so the different areas of Georgia are going to give you different feelings just from the environment. But where Angie and I are, because Athens is what, like an hour and a half outside of Atlanta?
Yeah, not
if
that. If that, maybe an hour, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's easy. We go there. Our friend, the guy who does my opening song for Esoteric Atlanta, Josh McKay, he lives in Athens. I was telling you, he's there. A lot of music in Athens. Athens is a cool town.
It is. I mean, it's been a really fun place. So I wasn't originally from here. I've been here since 91, but so I guess I am, I've been here a long time. But yeah, I mean, shows all the time. I mean, and the opportunities that have come our way, just like, Alabama Shakes band, years ago came through, and the drummer had our pickles, and
I want you to talk about your pickles too in a minute. Yeah.
He went crazy over them. And so he's like, oh, emails me. He's got to have more. He needs them on the tour bus, and wanted to invite me to the Hangout Festival. And, and I looked it up online. I was like, I'm not going to that thing, like shoulder to shoulder with all these sweaty people. But then we weren't anywhere near those people. Set us up. I'm like, oh, we're in a cold tub, like bubbling cold tub, looking over the fence.
Looking at the sweaty people.
So anyway, things like that. Like I do know we've been very, very blessed just by, honestly, just blooming where I'm planted.
Yeah.
Not being afraid, because the adversity, like when I first started Fickles, I had just joined Facebook, and that was scary. Like I wasn't supposed to. My husband's like, I don't think you should do that, whatever. He went on a hunting trip to that place, that house back there. And so, it's in South Carolina. And and while he was gone, I had that big, monster of a computer, and I logged on, and there was an invite to Facebook from an older lady friend. And I thought, well, if she's on it, then it can't be scary. So I joined, and my very, very first post was, I'm pickling beans today. And I didn't even have a company or anything. Just like, that's what I'm doing.
Well, let's say, where Angie lives, just so you guys understand her connections, the university, at Athens is where the University of Georgia is located. And the University of Georgia is like has turned into one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. It's, both of my parents went to Georgia. My dad went to veterinary school in Georgia, which is, now I've learned, the best veterinary school in the world is at the University of Georgia in Athens. It's also where bands like REM is from, and B-52s are from Athens. There's a lot more bands from Athens. There's a lot of cultural stuff that goes through Athens, Georgia. And it definitely is very much a college town in the sense that you can feel the influence of the university around you when you're there. But there's so much else that's happening in Athens that's it's very eclectic. And there's also that old Southern too. I mean, you were telling me your husband's family is like generational. So you have that's when you're driving through Athens, you're driving through all the old neighborhoods with like the old, beautiful antebellum homes.
And the houses were named, like the Finnessy House and the Finnessy Hamilton House and the Finnessy Segrest House. I mean, they're all over town.
Yes. So do you want to give anybody a bit of the background of your family, since we're going to be covering Athens in a future episode? So your husband's family is like a big deal in Athens.
A big deal,
Yeah.
And I'm from like nothing. We always said like I married like the silver spoon, even though that doesn't mean that you can't lose it all, which we did, But so it just a completely different thing. Me coming from South Georgia, no money really, from that, and just always like kind of knowing how to work, like my grandparents with their farm and all that. Like that was just normal to be sitting under a tree, like shelling peas for other people to purchase, and just picking potatoes or planting, taking your big toe and putting seed, using your toe to dig a hole to put a seed in to plant potatoes and things like that. I just grew up doing that, like always dirty, And then to marry into this family, I've learned a whole lot, but I've also have learned in maybe the past 5 or so years that I am good enough, and that me trying to fit into some mold isn't going to help anyone, and we all need to be our true selves, or else it's just fakery. I don't know. Nothing ever changes. Like you just keep repeating, and families keep repeating the same curses, or whether they call them generational curses or whatever. But my grandmother on my mom's side, my mom's mom, told me when I was very little, she's the one that named me Angela. She said, "Heavenly messenger." And, so she said that she just knew that I was going to be the one to break the curse. And I never knew what it meant, really. And now over time I've learned she was the oldest of 14 children in very South Georgia, like Amiga, Cairo,
near Equipment,
that area.
Yeah.
Egypt. So
yeah. That's right near Equipment, where a Cairo's are. Yeah. I've said that if this is the real Egypt, then it's not Cairo, guys. It's Cairo. That's how they say stuff.
Right, like syrup.
Yeah, syrup. Well, what did my grandmother, who was a valedictorian of her college class, would say? Pianer, winder.
Yeah.
So we're by the winder.
Winder.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was about Victoria never called. Yeah. Yeah. So you're growing up like, I mean, that is down South Georgia too. I mean, you are. I remember being on the property. My great grandfather died, but I have memories of being on his property and equipment and just the gnats everywhere. And yeah.
You just got used to it. It was just normal for them to all be like all in your eyes. I still can see like little babies at the family reunion just covered with gnats all in their eyes. And it was just nothing. You didn't even swat them away. They were just part of it.
It's so freaking hot and muggy. I mean, it is literally like being in a bowl of hot soup all the time. It's funny. My grandmother said that when she was alive, she said that's how she thought she found meditation, was when she was a kid, there was just nothing to do but just sit there and stare because it was too hot.
That was me. I carved soap.
Yeah.
No, like it's
just too hot. It's too damn hot to do anything else. So you moved. So you what brought you to Athens from South Georgia?
My parents moved up to Atlanta. That's what my family would always say. That moved up to Atlanta. They're not even part of our family anymore. You're like for a job that my dad had at the time whenever I was 12. And then they bought property right down the road from here in Bostwick in Morgan County near Madison. Mm-hmm. And so we moved there. I went to Morgan County High School in Madison, very historic town. Great cemeteries, great old homes. And so I graduated high school there, and then I never went to college. I had a dream of being a journalist, and that's really what I wanted to do. And honestly, like, not to play the victim anymore, because I used to say this way. I would say, my dad was just drunk and asleep my whole life, so he didn't even realize I graduated high school and never even talked to me about college. Like, it was just not a thing. I went straight to work. I worked at the Bank of Morgan County in Rutledge, and then I ended up getting a job at Athens First Bank here downtown, which huge blessing. Mm-hmm. Like, I met so many people. I was the downtown girl. I was actually in a newspaper 4 years in a row, best bank teller in Athens.
That is so Southern. Like that is so Southern, a newspaper. That is, I love it. I love it.
I'm like, Dad, where are these newspapers? I don't know where they are, because I would have just framed that.
I know, right? Like that. I love it. That's in the New Earth. That's what we need to go back to newspaper, having those articles, because I love it. And that's community pride, right? That's like community. And that is in Athens, even though Athens is a pretty international town with the school, I think there is kind of still a little bit of a small town feeling from the families that have been there for a very long time.
They're all very connected. And, it is a very small town, actually, when school's not in. Mm-hmm. It's very small. We can park anywhere downtown. And you always know when the students come back. Like, we happened to be driving through downtown the other day. We'd gone to the cemetery, and then we were driving through downtown. I was like, what is going on? And we were like, oh, yeah, it's move-in day. Here come the students.
So if people are not from the South, I've said this all the time, like, we party in cemetery. Like, going to a cemetery is a huge part of Southern culture. Like, that is an activity you do. And I don't think people believe me when I say that, but it's true. Like, you go to the cemetery, you go explore cemeteries.
You have a name of a person right here that I met that day at the cemetery. And she was from like Carrollton, Georgia. She's actually from California, but now she lives in Carrollton. And she said, it just looked like a good day to go explore cemetery in Athens.
We're weird. I mean, we are that's what I love about the South, is that here, Angie and we're two Southern women. We went to church on Sundays, but we'll go light some candles in a cemetery.
Oh yeah.
We'll go talk to some dead people in a cemetery. Like, we'll do that. And that's what I was telling you with Stephanie off before we were filming with Stephanie. I was in Salem, and the way they ran the cemeteries in Salem, like, you couldn't touch the graves. You couldn't. I'm like, this would not fly in the South. Like, just the graveyards will happen in place in the South, and people would be like giving them the middle finger and going sitting on top of the grave and lighting a freaking candle. Like, this is not, or putting pennies on top of the graves. They do all that kind of stuff to appease the dead. And we were saying before, like, how we take our ghosts very seriously here in the South. I grew up in a haunted house. I grew up in a haunted school. It is what it is. And I remember one of my friends, when your friends first start having children and seeing them with their children, the people you grew up with. One of my friends, when she had her daughter, was like 2 at the time. This was years ago. And she lived in a haunted house. And I remember her talking to her daughter and being like, now, if you see the ghost, just say hello.
Yeah.
Say hello. No big deal. Just say hello. You know, it's just how it is down here. It's like that Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. If you watch the movie, they show the guy with the ghost dog walking, and it's like, yeah, that's the South. That's normal. And what, you guys don't do that in the North? You know, walk a ghost dog? Like,
actually, the uncle in that movie, or the man in that movie, is the uncle of a girl that my husband, I think, dated in high school.
Oh, really? The one that killed the kid? The Kevin Spacey character? Because he was he was not from Savannah. He had moved to Savannah because he was like an architect or something, or a designer, and he was going, because Savannah kind of went through like a revitalization period where they like revitalized a lot of the old homes. Savannah's had its track. I mean, Savannah is definitely the revenge body of all the southern cities, because it's had its heyday of being very violent, got really run down. But then that time period came in where they bought it and revamped it up and brought back those houses to life. And that's what I think that's what he did, right? He brought up a bunch of those houses back to life and got caught up in some
I'm glad you study so much and know so much. You absorb it all, and you should be, you're like Professor Brice. Like,
I'm just a nerd. I'm a nerd. I did a whole playlist on Savannah when I first opened my channel, and I was like, it's just interesting to me. It's like the story of and why people choose to stick around, like why entities choose not to like move forward to like, why do they choose to stick around? Do they know they're dead? Like, you know, there's difference between like a residual haunting versus an intelligent haunting. And it's just like the concept of like what free will really looks like, even after we've left our physical bodies, like the fact that we have that choice. If we want to stick around, we can. It's just fascinating to me. And I do know that people that do go into the light, they can also come back if they need to help their loved ones. Right. And it's fascinating to me. And it's not something they cover in Vacation Bible School, even though everybody in that Vacation Bible School has had a haunting at some point in their life. So they don't talk about it at church. So,
and actually, you know, saying that I went to church every Sunday, I did pretty much with my grandparents, my country grandparents. My city grandma was very charismatic, and, you know, she went to a different kind of church. They were loud in her church and ran up and down the house. You know? So that was just, you know,
a little too much.
A little too much. So I did go to the Baptist church with my my country grandparents. And I have memories of standing up on that pew when I was little. Everybody, all the elders would come around and I would sing, Jesus loves me, this I know. Now it makes me think of like Ring Around the Rosie. For the Bible tells me so. And I'm like, that is so creepy.
Yeah.
That is so creepy. If you have to have a book to tell you that you're loved by God. I don't know.
Right? Right. That's what I keep. That's the big thing about the Sophia text that like touched me so much, is the fact that the Sophia Code, it was repeated over and over and over again that you were born with the Holy Spirit inside of you.
Yeah.
That is not something you have to invite into you. It's already there. It never left you. It never will leave you. And that was so impactful, because then I started, and I laugh about the Southern churches because, you know, like my family, as people say, when they get real hot, I'm sweating like a whore in church. You know, I love saying that, you know, it's funny, and there is a Southern culture to it as well. But that whole mind trickery that they do, whether intentionally or not, really bothers me, because human beings are so much more than that. And they don't, you know, you don't have to be, you don't need a book. God's not bound by a book.
No.
Especially one that's been edited a lot. So
I know. And I didn't really even know this until I started watching you. So, yeah. And now I'm just like, I told you the other day, I was like, I kind of moved them all around and put them in a cabinet. It's like, I had them everywhere. Almost like if I had just had one in each room, and that meant I was safe. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And growing up, I wasn't allowed to get dust on it, or like if my Bible sat on my dresser, you know, and it had my name on it, you know, given to me at birth probably.
Yeah.
And if I just set like a trinket or a rock or something down on, I was in trouble. Like if it had to stay like without anything on top of it, or, you know.
And that's so, you know, you say that. My friend Stephanie and I, who's going to do the Athens show, we love watching this girl on YouTube called Rachel Photon. She is a tarot. I love her.
Yeah, I discovered her because of you. Yeah,
she's amazing, and she has a backstory where she had kind of had like, Rachel, if you see this, I apologize if I'm telling your story wrong, but when I remember she had maybe a near-death experience or something where God had told her, like, you need to start to walk away from, there's some inconsistencies in the Bible, and I need you to help people understand the greater, it's time, basically, it's time. Anyway, forgot. Oh, yeah. So the Bible, when I'll have to tell a funny story of someone I know that used to use Bible paper to roll joints. And I think God has a sense of humor with that. I think God probably thinks that's really funny, but the Bible has been very much manipulated.
Yeah.
And people say, you know, Rachel, this was where I went. Rachel was saying that, you know, they'll tell you shouldn't have any idols or worship no gods before me, but people in the Christian faith will worship the Bible sometimes over God.
Yeah.
And the Bible, and that's just a fact that the Bible has been changed. That's not conjecture. That's not speculation. That's a literal fact that it has been changed. And that's okay in some sense, because the whole relationship with God is with you anyway. You know, you see a 2-year-old, you have children at 2 years old, they know who God is.
Yeah, they do.
They don't need a Bible to tell them.
My oldest daughter, we called it being saved. Mm-hmm. You know?
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
So, let's see, she was like 9, I think 9. And, my husband and I were downstairs, we were having an argument, and she could hear us arguing. And I went up to kind of let her know that everything was okay, you know. And when I went up, she was crying, but she goes, Mom, God was just in the room with me. Yeah. Yeah. And so she's the one in Brooklyn. And so she said, God was just in the room with me. So of course we had to have her baptized immediately, like, you know, because she'd gotten saved. But, you know, we did. I mean,
get the luncheon, get the luncheon, the baptism. Yes.
It was very sweet. We went to one of these kind of new churches at the time where they do the video thing, and they did a whole like interview with her, and she said, it's all because of my mom. My mom talks to me all the time about God. So that was a very sweet, you know, I just remember she was wearing these little pigtails. So cute. But so still it's still the same. It is still real. Yeah. But I don't think she had to be baptized.
No, I always see baptism as like ceremonial and like culturally anyway. Like, I don't think that dumping a person in water, putting water on a person's head is going to determine whether they're going to go to heaven or not. I think the God we worship is a little bit more discerning than that. But
everything's your intuition, intention, right?
Yeah, exactly. Your heart's desire. And I often thought, like, if I had a child, would I baptize them? And the answer is, even though I'm so against a lot of what the church does, I probably would, just because of my family. You know, because it literally is just a cultural thing. Even though I don't know if I would even raise my kid in the church, I probably would do it just for the family, just for cultural, just because that's, you know, just something to have pictures of, you know, when he's in the, you know, we baptize I grew up Presbyterian, so we baptize as babies. So you don't even.
Right. And like christen babies.
Yes. I mean, you don't even remember it. You have a baptismal gown that's like passed down from generations. It's like freaking disgusting by the time you put it on your kid, because it's been worn by so many different babies.
And in the Baptist church, at least where I came from, you weren't baptized until you were for sure saved. Yeah, you've made that conscious. You might have to do it again in case you've slipped, and you know, you really weren't saved the first time.
I watched a stand-up comedian once from Tennessee talk about how many times he was baptized one summer. Like, it was almost like that get out of jail free card. Like, oops, guess I got to go get baptized again.
And I'm not making fun. You know, this is not like picking on anyone's religion or anything, because I mean, my parents, of course, are still, you know, like it's everybody around me is like this. Yeah. So but it's just once your eyes are opened,
it's humorous. It is, and God has this. I always tell people, my teacher in India always says that comedy is the highest sense of spirituality. The ability to laugh at the absurd and at yourself in the absurd. I mean, here I am laughing at it, and I'm saying I'd do it to my kid too, because it's cultural, you know. But it's just being able to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Listen to this. Okay, talk about laughing at yourself. So my daughters had the same boyfriend. They lived together in New York for, let's see, they're going on about 7 years now. So
she's common law now. She's common
I
law.
love him so much. Like, he is my son, you know, like I really love him so much. But the first time, well, not the first time, but the second time he came and stayed at our house, and of course in separate rooms. And he was staying, like, we were in a rental house, we were building this one, and there was nothing in that room, but I was like, I am hanging a cross over the bed. Like, I hung a cross. Can you imagine what he must have thought? Like, this, I need to talk to him about it. It's funny now. But like, I hung a little cross over the bed. It was a little twin bed with no headboard or anything. Nothing was really in the room. But I was like,
it's like a nunnery.
I just don't know about this, because I don't know if he is a Christian. I mean, this was how I was, you know?
Well, I was the oldest. So my mother I was always, I think I got my dad's mom's personality, because I was always very laid back about a lot of things, like just very like, didn't care about certain, I mean, when I got my first tattoo, I think my mother about shat her pants, and now I have cousins who have tattoos. So it's like, you're welcome, guys. If you're watching, you're welcome. I'm the one that broke that barrier for you guys to go get tattoos. But
my daughter, I think when I was talking to her the other day, we were FaceTiming, I think she got another one. I think I saw another one. She got, I have a teacup thing, and there's a story about that too. So I've got teacups everywhere. I'm drinking out of one now. They're all over my house. People give them to me. They sign them. I sign them and send them to people. I'll send you one. But so she just remembers like growing up, and it would be me and my friends sitting around with our teacups drinking Prosecco out of them. And we'd always let her have a little teacup too, like a little bit of bubbly. And so she got, when she, my best friend, I've always been attracted to like older, like drawn to older women, and, you know, always had older women friends. And Meg, she died in 2016. And so she was like really where all the teacup stuff really got big. And Kat, my daughter, would come and have happy hour with us. And she would share her wisdom, you know, with us. Her name was Margaret also, you know, I've got a Margaret thing going on. So I'm going to do a whole playlist on the whole Margaret thing. So yeah, my daughter has right here on her back, she has a teacup, and she says, "What's your favorite cup, Mama?" And I sent her a picture of it, and she had that cup tattooed on her back, and it's got bubbles coming out of it. Aww. Anyway, so that was the first one. Now she's got, I think, her Gemini sign on her finger, and then I think I saw something else on her arm I didn't ask her about yet. So
this is my first one I ever got. It needs to be touched up. It's the Aquarian sign of her name. You could tell it's very old, but yeah, I had a friend once that, and I have one here as well, but I had a friend once that got like a friend of a friend got a tattooed on her rib cage, and my friend was like, "Girl, if you get pregnant, that thing's gonna turn into a bazooka." Like, just like stretch out. But no, it's so common now. And I, you know, with the whole culture of the South, my mother was like that with my boyfriends for a long time. But I'm, you know, 39. The funny thing about me is I think people, in the eyes of God, this idea of marriage is just like loyalty to the person that you're with, and I think you can be married in the eyes of God without being married by the state. Now, with that being said, there are benefits to being married by the state, as far as like, you know, if your husband cheats on you, you can go and
get it.
But after 7 years, you're common law anyway. So, you know, because the South does take that. I think, and I don't know now, but when my parents
got like half, I get half.
Yeah, when my parents got divorced, I think my mom got more than half. So I know the South does kind of take the side of the woman a lot of times, but you know, it's well, that was when my parents got divorced. That was, now divorce is so common, but that in the society I grew up in, that was not normal. People just didn't get divorced in that society. You know, they just did not get divorced. And when my parents did, I'm glad they got divorced, but that was like a huge wrench in that southern little town, like that this big prominent family, that they're were getting divorced. And I didn't know none of my friends' parents were divorced. I think some of my friends from high school, their parents are now divorced, but back then that wasn't.
Like, and it was a thing we would say, and their parents are divorced, or like, you know, she's got a friend coming over and their parents are divorced, or, you know, like somebody can say this like about my children's friends, you know,
yes,
their parents are. His parents are divorced.
Yeah, that's so. Well, always speaking of church, you just reminded me you did that. Like, you stand outside of like a Baptist church, a Methodist church, Presbyterian church. So not many Catholic churches in the South, but it's all the Protestant churches. If you're at like noon on a Sunday when church is released, If you just go stand outside and listen to the church ladies talking to each other, you're going to get the best gossip, because they'll be like, did you see what Susie was wearing?
Yep.
I heard she was cheating on her husband. We should pray for them.
Yeah.
If you just end it with we should pray for them, it doesn't count as gossip. And so you will get all the town information just by standing in the front yard of a church on a Sunday morning.
You do.
You get all the town information. It reminds me, when I was a kid, I think I've told, there was this billboard in the 90s, and my parents lived in Rome, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. And so you're driving through like Cartersville, and there was this big billboard, and all it said was, your wife knows. This was the best marketing campaign, because like for a month, and I was probably like in middle school or high school, so I didn't quite know like what that meant, but I would hear my parents talking about it and hear my mom talking about it with their friends, so I knew it was scandalous. And they left that billboard up for like a month. Then the next month it said like, your secretary knows. And like for another month, so people was like, somebody's rich wife is pissed because she found out her husband's cheating. Yeah. And then the last billboard said that everybody shops Toyota in Rome. It was like the best marketing campaign ever, because that
is really good.
It was good. I don't know if it would work in today's society, but back in the 90s, like that was one of the best marketing. Whoever came up with that strategy should have gotten like a total bonus, because I remember it, and I was a kid at the time, because it was such a big deal because of the scandal of, a potential marriage breaking because of an affair, that was happening. And it's just funny. That's just that Southern. Yeah, there's so many. And we were talking about that before we went live, or not live, but on recording that. So 2008, when we had the first housing crisis, that's when your life kind of changed drastically, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, we had, I had drawn this house on a piece of paper, and my husband was a builder at the time. He developed neighborhoods and things. And he had so many houses that weren't selling, and had to give one after another back to the bank. And then the last one to go was the one we lived in. And, I think it just sold for like almost $1 million just the other day. And I'm like, or a year ago or so, I'm like, we got punched.
Got punched.
I know. On a side note, we did sneak back in it after we sold it. And I took a light switch cover that my daughter had painted. I was like, it said, "You light up my life, Mom."
Mine.
Oh, I didn't get. I cried and cried and cried, because these people had bought this house, and they had just taken all the things that meant something to me out of it, like the old wood floors, and the mantle that we built, and the just things that I thought were just so important at the time. And I remember riding by that house and seeing a dumpster out on the street, and all the plants that we had transferred from like other places, like rhododendrons from North Georgia, and like were all just uprooted and just sticking out of that dumpster. Like, I thought it was just the end of the world, So we went from there, and we moved into a rental house that we still had. Because in Athens, it's such a big rental thing with all the college students.
Oh, yeah.
So we moved in there with all the urine, the cat urine smell, that had been left from the tenants before. Like, it was just very depressing. I think even my husband, he was very depressed, a man's ego when what he was doing isn't working anymore. There's really no income coming in from him. And I had started, before we lost our house, I had started just posting on Facebook that I was making pickles, and I'm pickling beans today. And I would really only make like maybe 12 jars of something per day. And then I would set them on the porch, and people would come by and leave money in a cigar box. And then, the paper did a story, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And then finally one day my husband comes home, and I was just like really stressed out that day. And I said, I can't do this by myself anymore. I'm going to need help. I said, Bell's food store has just now ordered like 40 something cases. He had no idea. Like, he just had no idea. It was just, we were doing all this, me and the kids, like I was still like making a steak for him when he got home. But I was going up the road to the Wendy's. The chicken nuggets were 99 cents for 4. I would go spend 99 cents. I'd get a head of broccoli, and I would cut those nuggets up and make them look like there was more, and feed all 3 kids. And then and then light a candle in the kitchen and have the house all clean, and he'd come home and there'd be like a feast, like.
Yeah.
We really did this. I'm not trying to put him down. That's not what this is about. But it's just like, this is what us Southern women do.
Yes, exactly. No, I makes sense to me. It totally makes sense to me my grandfather was a surgeon, and my mom said by the time she was really little that my grandmother had trained her and her sisters when their dad got home, they had to go up and say, "Daddy, what can I make you to drink?" And so by the time they were like 8 years old, they were making alcoholic drinks for their dad. That's just what you do as a Southerner. So it makes sense to me. Yeah. So people who are watching who think that's just weird, no, this is just Southern culture. That's just what it is. So your husband had no idea.
Yeah, like at that time, my dream was to be June Cleaver. Like I really wanted to be that Leave It to Beaver mom,
Yeah. And the universe was like, that's not what I have planned for you.
Yeah. So for real, I used to say that all the time. I'm like June Cleaver. Just I grew up on Leave It to Beaver. But gosh, so yeah, that happened, and then we lose the house. But the whole thing with the pickle thing, it was just at the time I was just doing like pickled beans and green tomatoes, and I was never going to pickle a cucumber because I was like, no, that's just normal. So now I have to, because they're, it just kind of, I had to do it. Yeah.
You created like this enterprise out of the ashes. You were literally the Phoenix rising out of the ashes.
Yep. And I used my husband's name. So back whenever I was telling you how I joined Facebook and he didn't really want me to, I thought, well, if I make a company page for a company I really don't even have yet, I don't have a business license, but if I go ahead and make a company page, I'll use his name and I'll call the company, because he goes by Finn, like short for Finnzy, Phin. So I said, I'll call it Fickles. I'll use his name. And then the whole like motto was from my tour of that cemetery where the sexton said, if you went to a party, I don't know if this was before we started.
Yeah. So before we started, her husband's family was such a big deal that get invited to their party back in the day was like an honor.
Yeah, they said you were going to a really fun party. They were rich liberals, which is so funny. It's like, we are not rich liberals. But anyway, I just remembered that. So then after I created the name Fickles, and then I got a website, fickles.com, and then I thought motto. I was going to see if I have a bag sitting around here, but anyway, my business cards say, here we go, on the back, I don't know if you can see it, if it ain't fun, don't do it. And so that was the whole thing. And that came from that lady at the cemetery saying that. I was like, I'll make it all about fun. And really, like, if I have an issue with a store owner that I don't want to deal with anymore, that's all I ever say. If it ain't fun, don't do it. Bye.
Bye. It reminds me of the story. What's the chicken salad chick girl?
Yeah.
She's from, I think she might be from, Auburn is where she started making her chicken salad. And she just did really good chicken salads, and it just kind of grew and became this chain of these incredible, I'm a vegetarian, so I've never had it, but my mom and sister, they are there all the time at Chicken Salad Chick. And it's crazy how you just had an orb go by you, Angie, just so you know.
Did I?
Orb just
I wondered what that was.
Yeah, you got a freaking orb.
I saw it.
Yes, that's an orb. That's one of your angels, or I don't know, one of your guides, one of your angels. So
Margaret.
Yes, there you go. But isn't it amazing how, and I talk about that on my channel a lot about friction. And we talk about that like in the yoga world a lot about how friction is necessary for change. Because if there's no friction, then you're not going to change.
Yeah, you say this a lot, and I really like that. I've written it down somewhere even. Like I'm just like,
it is, and it's so easy to, when you're not going through the friction, to be like, oh yes, that was necessary. But when you're in the middle of the friction, it
doesn't feel great.
It doesn't feel good at all. And so sometimes when we have these moments of what the tarot cards will call a tower moment, when everything collapses, it's because something is being rebuilt.
And see, I've heard you say tower moment before, and I've never thought it. I didn't know that's what it meant. I thought it meant you were at the top of the tower. Like,
no, it just comes crashing. That's the tarot card. The tower moment is when something's going to be literally ripped from you. And sometimes those tower moments in life are not caused by anything you've done. Like with the housing crisis of 2008, we now know where that came from. that came from this group, this nefarious group. But what the devil will make for bad, God will always use for good.
Yes.
And I just had an orb go by me as I said that.
I saw that.
It's a party. Yeah. It was like an orb party. Spirit gets sassy. So it's such a testament to the human spirit and who we really are. And even in those moments, because we're all programmed to an extent, no matter where you grew up and what culture we laugh about the Southern culture. Both Angie and I were raised hardcore in this hardcore Southern culture. I mean, I had a great grandmother, Angie, who was from Philadelphia. I know nothing about her because she was a Yankee.
She was a Yankee.
She was a Yankee. I know nothing. Like, Stafford was her maiden name. That's all I know. So if there are any Staffords in Philadelphia, I'm your cousin. We can't date. Like, I'm your cousin, because my grandfather was like, we don't talk about her. His mother. He was like, she was a Yankee. She was mean. She was a Yankee. That's what he would say. So anyway, actually that grandmother, my great grandmother, when my mother is named after her, and my mother was the second born, and my mother's name was Mary Jo for a week. For a week. And then my Yankee great grandmother came down to Charleston and pitched a fit that my mother wasn't named after her. So they had to go change the birth certificate and change my mom's name to Alice. And my aunt, that's younger than my mom, who's since passed away, her name was Mary Jo. So, but my mom was like, my granddad's parents at that point, my grandfather was in medical school. My granddad's parents were paying their way. And so if my great grandmother wanted my mother's name changed, then they had to go change her name.
It's all the money.
They had to go down and change that baby's name. So
very important.
Very important. Well, my name, my mother wanted to name me Laura after the character in Dr. Zhivago.
Oh gosh.
And my grandmother, my mom's mom, was like, you are not naming her after a character from Dr. Zhivago. You're going to give her a family name. You're going to name her Brice. So it's the same thing happened. So my mother has been very good with my sister's kids. My mom has backed off and allowed them to none of my sister's kids, all of their first names are not family names, but their middle names are family names. So we've got some fresh blood. And that's the thing about the South too. Maybe this is common in your husband's a junior, your son's a third. My father was a junior. If I had been a boy, I would have been the third. Yeah. You see that a lot in families in the South where names are repeated over and over. You got 4 Williams in one generation.
Well, there's even Billups Finney Spalding, Billups Finney Johnson. I mean, this name. So the Spalding Hospital, all that.
Yes.
That's Bill. It's from this family line. And the Johnson, Billups Finney Johnson, they're down in Albany, Georgia, where I grew up. Never knew them. It's just, that name.
It's big. It is. And yeah, I mean, in South Carolina, the Brices, the Williams-Brice Stadium at the University of South Carolina, that's my mom's family that built. And I remember when I was in high school, my college advisor was like, you can just go to South Carolina without even taking the SATs because of your name. I was like, you really think that I want to go be a Gamecock with the name Brice on the state? That's embarrassing. There's no way in hell I'm going to that university. There's just no way. No. Not gonna happen. That's so embarrassing. But yeah, it is. It's the names are really important down here in the South, and that's a lot of weight to carry though.
I know. Our son is the only, he's the last. He's it. Tillman boy. That's it. Because everybody else had girls, or they had they were girls marrying outside of the Tillman family. So yeah. He's the last Tillman. That's a
lot of pressure.
Yes.
That's a lot. My dad was the last Watson. He had all sisters and then he gave birth to him. My mom had all girls. So I get that. That's a lot of pressure.
I don't put any pressure on any of my children. I'm like, Rosie, you don't want to go to college? What you want to do? She's like, I think I just want to maybe do makeup. I'm like, okay, you're
good. You know what? At this point, if I had a child in college age, I would probably try to sway them away. I mean, yeah. I mean, we all got to pay for the college. With all the stuff going on with the passing of these bills, and it's just the tuition is so high. What
Our
job?
son is at KSU, and he needs it for what he's wanting to do, like computers. I guess he needs it. I mean, he already, like, at 13 built his own computer, built his sister's computer. Like, he's so smart. He told me that he has I don't even know what Discord is, but he's got a group on there that
I'm on YouTube and I don't know what Discord is. So
he's like tutoring all of his classmates. Wow. Like, and that's even like the teacher, like the professors had to ask him, like, how did you do that? Like, or like,
he's just, that's his gift. That's his God-given talent. No, but like doing makeup for a living, like, I think about like cutting hair, like these are really smart kids at this point too, that are choosing to go that route, because everybody needs a haircut.
Yep.
Everybody needs help with makeup. Everybody needs, plumbing done. Everybody needs their oil changed.
Right. And
at this point, with everything going on in the world, like to learn, actually, my dad did say that once. That was some good advice he gave us, even though he was a veterinarian. We all went to college, but he was like, find a trade as well. Like, even though you have an education, find something you can actually do with your hands, because that can always be your backup, which is kind of what you're doing. Like, you have this natural ability. You've created this business that's obviously very successful, because you're not
taking it back though. It's since the pandemic, it has become like I have no employees anymore. Zero. Yeah. So it's just me and my husband, and today is golf day for him. And so I told him, I said, I don't know why I scheduled this for 11, because I know you're going to still be here and I don't want to talk with you in the room. Like whatever.
Was he there? Is he listening?
He said bye to me earlier, but he's gone. But yeah, his friend came to get him, I think. He will have beer today. So his friend, he has.
Good for him. Well, you know what? There are a lot of truthers that are like, alcohol is bad. I'm like, listen, when you grow up in the South, I love the smell of alcohol on people, because I remember my family coming home with like their cocktail clothes on and carrying us to bed and like smelling it on their clothes. Like, listen, God wants you to have fun. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Have a beer. Like, just relax with your friends.
He doesn't drink scotch very often, but it seems like it's more like in the winter or near the holiday time, and our kids were always like, is he drinking scotch? Because he always says yes to anything if he's drinking scotch. Like yes, sure.
My dad's dad would have 2 scotches every single night of his life. And that's just, every time I see that scotch, I think of my granddaddy Ed. He would have his scotch every night. That was his.
What is the difference? Because a beer does not do this to him, but scotch and wine doesn't do this to him. But if he drinks scotch, he'll look at me and he's like, I love you.
That's me on the rum. That's me on the rum. I think it's just the way the compounds of the alcohol hit people's system differently. Beer, I get goofy. I'm a fun time. But rum, I get very like lovey-dovey. I'm not good with wine. Wine gets me headaches. I can't do wine. Tequila, I had a really bad experience with tequila one time. So every time I smell it, I'm like, whoa, no.
Gross. I know. I can do it every now and then, but no.
Yeah, it's but yeah, that's part, and again, that's part of the Southern culture. Like we're drinkers. I was telling my friend Stephanie when she came down to visit, I was saying how there's a bar my mom has a bar at her house, and I was like, that's common in the South. A lot of houses have bars in them.
It's the first thing you see when you come in my back door from my garage. Is a bar.
My sister has a bar in her house. I'm like, this is just, a lot of houses in the South are built. My mom's parents had 2 bars in their house. They had a full bar and what we would call like the playroom. It was like the pool room. There's a full bar. And then they had a little bar in like the fancy den, not the living room, but like the fancy. The living room was like real fancy, but then like the fancier, like when the guests came over that were proper, that then they had this. I'm like, this is just part of the Southern culture. Like I said, my mother would have, about 8 years old, was making my granddad mix drinks. When he would come home from work, my granddad, the one who had scotch every night, my dad's dad, he picked me up from school once and took me to the country club for dinner. And granted, this was in the 90s, so it's not now, but this was in the 90s, and country clubs are owned technically by the members because they pay for it.
Right.
And I was 14 at the time, and I remember sitting at the table with my grandfather. I don't know why it was just the 2 of us. I don't know why my sister wasn't there, my cousins weren't there. It was just the 2 of us. And the waiter comes by and we order, and my grandfather ordered me a drink, an actual alcoholic beverage. And the waiter kind of looked at my granddad and looked at me, and my granddad said, I'm her guardian. I'm going to teach her how to drink properly. Go get her a drink. And the waiter goes, yes, sir. And walked back and got me a drink. And I had to sit there at 14 years old with my grandfather to learn how to drink a cocktail. Nowadays, that probably wouldn't happen. They probably would have called the cops. But, you know, in the South was like, yes, sir. And the same age at 14, my granddad, same granddad, picked me up from school. And we were driving his big old Lincoln down the road to his house. And he pulled the car over to the side of the road. He told me to get out and he told me to get in the driver's seat. And he said, you're going to start learning how to drive.
Yeah, I used to have to drive my dad around all the time. Now, this is kind of backwoods. So, like I said, I came from a different spoon. But my dad would get drunk and he would lay across the hood of the truck.
And you had to drive him home.
Yeah, and I was like, he said he was looking for deer tracks. We lived like dirt roads, and you know, like I was like 8, driving a stick, like trying. And my mom was always at ceramic class, like she was painting ceramics that night. It was like every Thursday.
That's so. I mean, that's why I guarantee you, if a cop had pulled over, he'd probably just tell you to get on home.
Yeah.
I mean, if a cop had pulled me over with my granddad in the car, my granddad would have been like, you, sir, I'm going to go tell your grandmother or your mother, you know, my grandfather would probably be scolding the cop. You know, that's just how it was back then. My dad, I know in Quitman would hit my grandmother's grandparents. He was driving the Scout stick at like 8 years old around the farm. Yeah. You know, that's just what.
No, I mean, we needed to know how to do those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he would go spend the summers with his grandparents, my great grandparents. And I remember, so this is another funny Southern story. So my grandmother's grandparents, down in Quitman, Georgia, and Quitman's tiny, isn't it, Angie? It is like a speck on the map. It's tiny.
I only know one store there, out on a whim. I know every store that carries my products. So and it's in Quitman.
Yeah. So needless to say, my grandfathers, the Bennetts, they were a powerful family. They were a lot of them were attorneys. Well, a very wealthy family. And when my grandmother started dating my grandfather, the Bennetts were Democrats. That's the one part of my family. They were Democrats, but they were also Protestants. My grandmother was dating at the time, before she met my granddad, a Democrat who was a Catholic. Ooh. And that was very hard for my great-grandparents to swallow that pill that he was Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, when my grandfather came around and he went down to meet my grandparents, they were okay with the fact that he was a Republican as long as he wasn't a Catholic. So it's just funny how the old Southern like hang-ups. I mean, my sister's married to a Catholic at this point, but they're not. His mom's Italian, so it's more cultural. And it's just crazy, like how many issues there would have been back in, if that had been like 50 years before in the South, where now it's not that big of a deal. You know, it's all these little cultural things are so funny, but it just makes us who we are. And all these other things that were culturally acceptable when I was a kid, like driving my grandfather or having an alcoholic beverage at the country club, would not happen today. No. Would not happen today. They would have called the cops on my granddad. You know, for doing that, you know, so that's just the Southern. That's what makes, and that's why people are always like, oh, I loved what's the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. Oh, yeah. Like that's just the South. That's just how it is.
That's normal.
Normal. That's just like Yaya. Like that's normal. Like they were laying out, taking their clothes off, driving in the heat. I'm like, sounds good to me. That's good. Our parents would have been pissed, but like it's that hot where you're like, whatever. So Angie, I know we're coming on over an hour. You're going to be back for us to do a deep dive into Athens, Georgia. So for you guys who are liking these deep dives, and as I've been talking to you, I'm thinking I need to come to Athens. We need to film together in Athens something. And I want us to do, I'm putting you on the spot on a video. I want us to do a deep dive together into the werewolf of South Georgia.
Love it.
Let's do it. I want you to look into it too. So I know the story, and then we can maybe bring Stephanie back on and see what we can find even more about who this girl was and what she really is shapeshifter.
That's right. I do remember that it was a girl. Like, girl. Yeah. I don't know why I think werewolf is a boy. But yeah, I remember watching your video a while back.
Well, and the thing is,
I probably didn't believe it.
I think when I covered it, I probably thought she just had some like hairy disposition or something, and the people, in the town. But now that I've like known Jesse's a voter, and I'm like, what was she a werewolf? Like, what was happening?
Was she?
So I'm gonna ask you to look into it, and we'll also revisit that story, because there's some other stories I do want to revisit that I covered a long time ago, because now I have a different perspective
Right. Everything. I have a different perspective about everything.
Yeah, everything. Nothing. Every time I talk to Jesse's a voter, I'm always like, oh my God, Grimm's fairy tales is more of a reality than
but truth is stranger than fiction. It really is.
It really is. It really is. And I'm still not, I mean, I still am under this assumption that this is Egypt. Where we live was the original Egypt.
Yes. I would show you, but they're in another drawer. My mother-in-law went to Egypt a while back, and she brought back these papyrus little paintings, and I haven't done anything with them yet, but I have such a connection. I'm like, there's some reason. Why am I drawn to this? Why do I really I just covered my dining room chairs not too long ago with a staple gun and this old fabric that she brought back from Egypt. I just felt I'm supposed to.
And blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people were in Egypt as well. And we see that in drawings. So you don't have to be a black person to be Egyptian. You can also be a white person. I always laugh, in all the hieroglyphics, there's blue people. Why aren't we talking about the blue people? Is this not weird?
Tara?
Is this not weird? How come nobody mentions this? We just go through school and they just kind of slide by the fact that there's a freaking blue person. Where are these blue people? This is crazy. So yes, we have so much Angie. I'm so excited. Once again, guys, I'm going to go ahead and reshare her channel. So you guys go ahead and subscribe to Angie's channel. And will you send me your links to now, do you ship your pickles or do you ship any of your stuff to people outside of Georgia?
I do. A whole lot of people in Atlanta even order. So even though Alon's Bakery has it, but a lot of people just, have learned not to get out anymore. They just we ship every day.
So I'll put a link to your website down in the description box too.
Yeah.
Because what a great gift to give people too. That if you go to someone's house or there's you don't quite know what to get them, getting them something like this is so unique, and especially since I really believe that right now, even though we all still have to use the Amazons and use the big chains right now, I'm still, any chance I have to promote a small business, because I believe going forward, we're going to be going back to us manufacturing our own stuff and there's more love put into it that way. And
we're actually trying to go back to that. There's stores. I look at my phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell them? Since we don't have any employees anymore, it's really hard for us to get distribution going and getting the deliveries made. And they're ordering and going, people are asking, the shelf is empty. I'm like, well, they can order online because we can't keep up with the demand, and we've never been able to keep up with it. But right now we really can't. Yeah. Not for the stores. We can keep up with the retail side of it online.
The personal. Yeah. So I'm going to put that link up, guys, because what a great, what a great gift. What a great thing to have in your own home. I know in the South too, if someone comes over, you have to, you put a plate out of cheese and crackers. What's amazing to have something like that. So you can put out for guests to come over. And so guys, go and check out her. And I have to say, Angie, your channel is turning into my favorite channels, because I love your personality. I think you're so hysterical, and there's so much honesty. And that's what I love about this. I love a good sense of humor anyway, because you see Stephanie and me together, we crack up at the most inappropriate things, but that's life is comical. This is the most being a human is hard. Humaning is really hard. And we all chose to come back into these really dense, heavy bodies and experience this dense, heavy life. And so if you can find people that make you laugh, then you have found a true treasure. And so I'm going to really encourage you guys to go and check out Angie's channel and just watch her videos, because she's funny. She's honest. She's obviously, if you watch her videos, she's going through this journey with all of us, where we're all just trying to go wait a minute, shit's not adding up. Nothing is what we thought it was. But actually the truth, as you were saying, it just resonates. It feels better. Mm-hmm. The truth feels better. And we still got, I know we still have so much more left to learn, which I'm really excited about. And I know that September is going to be rough, guys. We're in the height of battle right now. So if you need that break and you need to laugh and smile, when things get tough, go check out Angie's channel. Because she will make you smile. So yes. Well, thank you, Angie. I'm so happy you came on today. I'm going to text you and Stephanie and figure out a time to film the Athens episode, and get you back on so we can pull some tarot cards and see what's going on in Athens, Georgia. And hey, I mean, we're going to be looking into the Werewolf of Georgia. If you guys are from South Georgia and also want to pitch in with the Werewolf of Georgia, just email me and we can do like a round table or something, because that's a wild story. That's a freaking wild story. So, so anyway, guys, we all love you very much. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button for Angie and my channel if you're not subscribed, and we will talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.